Far Harbor is widely regarded as the single best DLC for Fallout 4. There's a few dissenters out there that try and say Nuka World, but when you really break it down and get to the story of Far Harbor, most agree it's the best one, with one of the big points of praise being how it is much more of an RPG than even the base game of Fallout 4 itself, with many regarding Far Harbor to be almost a response to the criticisms of base game Fallout 4, and all of this got me thinking, what actually happens if you try to destroy every single faction in Far Harbor immediately? If you remember back, I did this with Fallout 4, taking down each of the various factions as I met them, and it actually leads to a very interesting scenario. Bethesda definitely accounted for this with some unique, only accessible options by playing that route. So with Far Harbor supposedly being an even better RPG, what kind of options do you have if you want to roleplay as an absolute madman trying to take everyone down as soon as you meet them? And we definitely find some very surprising outcomes and some very interesting outcomes playing this way. And if you guys do enjoy the content, I definitely have more videos like this planned. You can leave a like or get subscribed. This video took me a really long time to make, as you'll learn more about as we get into things. So anytime you're doing a challenge like this, one of the first things you need to do is get some good weapon mods, some fun things to basically decimate everybody else with. And with that, I was off to the Nakano residence to start off Far Harbor. Something pretty cool of Far Harbor, even though the traditional start does involve actually going to Ellie Perkins and talking to her and getting the quest based off the radio. Alternatively, you can actually just walk up to their house and the quest will immediately trigger and you can progress things from there. So after a short jog through the rain and actually a ton of animals nearly killing me and me lowering difficulty, I had arrived. And of course, from here, the first test has to begin, and unfortunately, the Nakanos are actually essential. Now, if you don't know what essential means, Fallout 4 characters at some points in the game are unkillable. They'll just be downed and eventually get back up, this being because they are marked essential by Bethesda. But depending on your actions or certain quests you go down, characters can lose this tag. So unfortunately, right off the bat, we actually had to interact with some people. Not really the best start to a kill everyone playthrough, and you have to go through the typical hoops of talking to the family a bit and eventually break into the safe to get Kasumi's holotape. And even just to make extra sure, I tried taking them out after the initial dialogue and once I was able to go to Far Harbor, but even then it didn't work. Not off to a great start, Todd, but don't worry, we'll definitely be back here. And now on the boat, I finally had the opportunity to properly travel to Far Harbor. And of course, Bethesda really had the opportunity to prove the RPG prowess of Far Harbor, and unfortunately, you're immediately met with a bunch more essential NPCs. So something interesting I actually discovered here, if you just immediately try and take everyone out at Far Harbor, you can get about half the town, but most of the notable characters, those named NPCs, will remain essential and will consistently keep getting back up. Oddly enough though, at one point, I could actually take out Avery, and no one really seemed to care about that one. Maybe a bit of foreshadowing there, if you know what I mean. Although, there were two NPCs marked as essential that were rather surprising, and that is this Harbor Woman and Harbor Man. There were several Harbor Women and Harbor Men that you could actually take out, but for whatever reason, these two were essential. Not really sure why that was. I don't know if these guys are like modeled after some Bethesda employees' parents, but just kind of an interesting observation. I even tried defending Far Harbor against the initial raid to see if that would change anything. Unfortunately, it didn't. Although Nick Valentine, who I happened to bring with me because I thought it'd be kind of ironic, did really take the whole Far Harbor defense thing seriously and actually frontlined the defense. But before we get into that, I do want to say a big thank you to Surfshark for sponsoring this video. The internet can be a pretty spooky place sometimes. There's nothing quite as creepy as having a conversation about something odd and specific like Lego sneakers, and then suddenly seeing ads for that thing everywhere. And no, that definitely didn't happen to me. Well, Surfshark VPN can make sure that never happens to you again. And with a ton of new websites popping up for Fallout mods, taking you to all kinds of corners of the internet, I think most of us could use this protection now more so than ever before. And for an added layer of protection, you could even set up Surfshark Alert ID to immediately tell you the next time somebody is trying to break into your email. But hey, even if you're living life on the wild side and not too worried about your online safety, Surfshark also gives you the ability to watch hundreds to thousands of TV shows and movies you typically wouldn't be able to due to your location. So if you want both protection and freedom online, check out that link in the description and use code JUICE. You will not only get 83% off, but also 3 months of service totally for free. And if you're somehow not happy, Surfshark even offers a 30-day money-back guarantee. So thank you again to Surfshark for sponsoring this video. Although another little fun fact, when you actually arrive in Far Harbor, you don't really have to do anything. The whole town of Far Harbor is pretty optional here. You could actually just beeline it through the town, avoid that whole initial raid, and run straight to Acadia. Traditionally, you would have to actually defend against the attack and then have Old Longfellow give you you coordinates to Acadia, but this way you could actually just make it so you'd never have to deal with the creature defense. In Acadia 2, you have unfortunately a similar result as you would imagine. This is actually kind of cornerstone of the Far Harbor questline. When you initially arrive at Acadia, all of the doors are locked, forcing you into that initial conversation with Dima. Of course, I tried to take him out, unfortunately essential, but we'll return to that. Although funny enough, it seems like this playstyle actually kind of triggers a bug in that even though all of the doors were locked and I couldn't get to any of the NPCs, as I tried to flee, almost the entirety of Acadia actually popped out the door behind me and started trying to ambush and attack me. I was definitely not expecting that outcome after a few pot shots at Dima. So then with everything riding on this final interaction, we made our way to the Nucleus to see if we could actually take out the Children of Adam, that being the last major faction of Far Harbor, and fortunately, Bethesda's RPG chops were proved somewhat, and you are able to take out the entirety of the Nucleus and the Children of Adam immediately. It is actually a relatively tough fight. You will definitely need some Radaway, even on very easy with some good weapons, but after several minutes of this, I had taken down everyone, gotten some great armor, and even did have Texas's hat for myself. So we had to check for at least one of the three. At this point, I was at a bit of a conundrum. The game basically forces you to be the nice guy somewhat. You actually have to do some quests, although not as many as you would think, and I was actually really surprised how things are handled from here on out. You still never actually have to go back to Far Harbor, and fortunately, the people of Acadia are quite forgiving, so just after a day break, they all love me again, even though half their settlement still was technically dead outside, and all the residents were mysteriously locked behind those doors again. So you gotta do that whole question the nature of your reality talk with Dima, but fun fact, this is actually the only time I talked to Dima in this entire playthrough. From there, you do the same thing with Kasumi. I chose to just let her believe whatever she wants because honestly, I didn't really care. And she does bring up that question of some mysterious and suspicious things going on with Dima, and since we're a detective, of course, we have to investigate. Which from there, we did return to the Nucleus, which typically would prompt that Children of Adam questline. Of course, since we took out that entire faction, the Nucleus was just completely deserted. So you just run through the building and then do start the fan favorite quest with Dima's memory puzzles. These puzzles are largely regarded as one of the most fun aspects of Far Harbor, as it really is a nice change up in the gameplay. Most people don't actually like some of those RPG choices, the extended dialogue, or even the actual combat and exploration. It's solving puzzles while you're unable to sprint. That's what people are really after. And from here, with Dima's memory puzzles behind us, we have a couple of choices. We can recover the nuke launch key and destroy Nucleus, and technically I did do that just to show you can do that. Considering we already took out all of the Children of Adam, this doesn't really make much sense, but I actually found a surprising outcome here. So when returning to Nucleus with the nuke launch key, you actually have a ton of Children of Adam defending it. I guess Bethesda didn't really want it to be too easy, even though I wiped out everyone that's traditionally here. They just decided, hey, let's spawn in some kind of threat and challenge. And there's a fair few Children of Adam zealots that you will have to clear through on the outside, and even several on the inside, and even in the hull itself. And then you can blow up the Nucleus, but of course, that doesn't make much sense. What makes a lot more sense is actually getting ourselves the wind farm codes to allow the fog to take over Far Harbor. And from here, it's actually pretty much smooth sailing. You're just running from point A to point B, and eventually actually disabling Far Harbor's defenses, where you can then find a completely destroyed Far Harbor. You'll have some of the remaining characters fending off against creatures of Far Harbor, and after clearing this all out, you do have basically Far Harbor completely destroyed. At this point, even old Longfellow died somehow. I wasn't really sure how, and I couldn't find his body, but he was gone. And to roll the clock back, all you actually have to do to get to this point is just that brief conversation with Dima, and then the brief conversation with Kasumi, and you could have Far Harbor completely wiped out. Definitely felt like I was speedrunning the DLC at this point, and I made sure even that bizarre unkillable Harbor Man and Harbor Woman were also dead. And at this point, I technically never even interacted with the people of Far Harbor, which makes their whole essential status aspect actually feel kind of odd. Why is Far Harbor essential at all when you could never talk to them and have them all be taken out completely? You just have to actually facilitate the help of another faction. It feels like they definitely had a missed opportunity with leaving Far Harbor completely non-essential, but we'll again talk about this more later. But then what actually ended up being genuinely the most shocking part of this entire playthrough, as you return back to Acadia, you find Dima completely fed up and will no longer interact or talk to you whatsoever, but he isn't actually killable. So even though destroying Far Harbor will lock you out of Acadia, and typically this is where you kind of side with the Children of Adam a bit more, you can actually take down Acadia even after taking down Far Harbor. And at this point, I was kind of locked. This because, for whatever reason, Kasumi was completely completely bugged and also wouldn't talk to me. It was stuck at a phase as if I hadn't actually done some of the previous quests, even though I did. Even further, in the process of taking down Far Harbor, it actually automatically fails the quest for discovering Dima's secret with Avery, so it's not even like you had that route. And at this point, technically, with the Far Harbor DLC, due to that bug with Kasumi, I was completely locked. There was nothing left for me to do. And of course, Acadia left unkilled, which was pretty unsatisfying. Frustrated with this outcome. Hopefully this is the point where I earned a like on this video. I just did the whole thing over again. I literally started a completely new, unmodded character, hoping to avoid any potential bugs, and went through the entire process a second time. And I even did Dima's memory puzzle a second time. This time I just used God mode though. I was not doing that legitimately again. And even after all that, you still don't get a very satisfying outcome. After the destruction of Far Harbor, you can either convince Kasumi to go home or stay in Acadia. I didn't really care, so she stayed in Acadia. You inform her parents, and that's where things are left. Acadia still unkillable, including Kasumi and Dima, and Kasumi's parents also unkillable, even though the quest of Far Harbor was over. But I know at this point, plenty of you are screaming at your screens right now, and you are right. Technically, there are two other options here. So you technically could recruit the help of the Brotherhood or Institute to roll into Acadia and take everyone out. But considering you could actually destroy the Brotherhood and destroy the Institute immediately, I feel like that kind of goes against a proper kill everything playthrough. And instead, one of the pretty cool options you have with Far Harbor is, after completing Dima's memory cycle, you could actually find the real Avery's body and just immediately return to Far Harbor. If you're not familiar with the situation here, basically Dima had Avery replaced with a synth version and buried her body somewhere where you could find her skull, locket, and holotape. This is kind of a funny one. This is actually my first time on this character ever talking to Avery, and it's me telling her she's actually a synth. It would have been really cool if there was some unique dialogue here, but unfortunately, Bethesda didn't add anything in. The same thing goes with Alan. It was my first proper interaction with him, and after a little bit of back and forth, I convinced Alan to take down Avery and move forward with the raid of Acadia. And this progresses things quickly, immediately completing some of those quests with Acadia, but it finally removes their essential status. So the entirety of Acadia, including notably Dima and Kasumi, are killable, and I did that personally. And then finally, the last remaining survivor with Faraday was taken care of, and Acadia as a whole was destroyed. At this point, I only ever had to do those initial two interactions with them, and you could wipe them out completely. At this point, a very pleased Alan reports to me that I can return to Far Harbor to talk to him and even discuss finishing off the Children of Adam. But of course, at this point, I'd already done that. And you're even awarded with a perk and a unique weapon. But also, at this point, you still have the Cleansing the Land quest, which is the one around the nuke key as well as the wind farm key. So I could just return to the wind farm and actually disable Far Harbor's defenses and have Far Harbor be destroyed yet again. Which of course, based off the premise of this video, I did do. And then really, there we had it. I actually walked through Far Harbor to witness the destruction, found most of the notable characters, and even just for good measure got rid of Alan altogether. At this point in the playthrough, I only had 2 bullets left in my favorite revolver, and of course I had to use those on Longfellow at his cabin, him already being aggroed to me because I decided to destroy Far Harbor in the end. But that was it. At this point, I managed to actually take down all of the major factions of Far Harbor. Destruction lay at each of their bases. Technically, even after using the wind farm kill switch, you can still go to Nucleus with the nuke code and actually blow it up if you just want to for whatever reason. Ultimate destruction, why not? But you still do have that final quest to report back to Kasumi's parents on what you found in Far Harbor. And unfortunately, despite my extremely entertaining playthrough, there still wasn't actually any unique or interesting dialogue here. You have the typical dialogue about destroying Acadia, or you could just not get into specifics. And from there, Far Harbor was complete with all 3 major factions destroyed, and for whatever reason, you still cannot take out Kasumi's parents. They still have the essential flag, which as far as I can tell, you actually can't remove from them. Even though they really aren't ever imperative to the quest, you could always kind of just find the holotape on your own and take the boat by yourself. You can't actually ever take out her parents. But to reflect on this overall, it actually is a particularly interesting outcome. To answer the initial question, can you take out every faction in Far Harbor immediately? Technically, that's only actually available with the Children of Adam, and you are forced into doing some of the Far Harbor quests. But to actually get all 3 factions destroyed, I only did about 3 minutes of dialogue. I did do a lot more running around and fighting various enemies at various locations, but I only ever had to have that initial talk with Dima, that initial talk with Kasumi, and then a bit of a back and forth with the Far Harbor residents convincing them to take out Avery and take out Acadia. It's an interesting choice by Bethesda because, technically speaking, you could pretty easily get a complete destruction scenario in Far Harbor, but for whatever reason, they made the choice to not actually let you do that alone. Like, the outcome is kind of what I was hoping for. Everybody destroyed, it just Bethesda doesn't actually give you the ability to do that immediately, for one reason or another. It even feels like something that would be relatively easy to mod in, and kind of a cool mod, especially if there could somehow be some kind of unique nod to you, whether it be a unique reward or some kind of crazy perk for taking out everything. So as Far Harbor, you can't be a complete madman and shoot everything on sight, but with just a few brief conversations, you can get the ultimate destruction of the island and even claim it for yourself with Longfellow's cabin. So overall, I'd probably give Bethesda like a B+ on this one. I actually think the vanilla Fallout 4 outcome is almost a bit more interesting because there are some unique options, but at least with Far Harbor, you can actually eliminate almost everyone. I guess Bethesda just really likes Kasumi's parents. Either way, I do hope you guys found this one entertaining or informative. I think finding these almost unique interactions with Bethesda games is pretty cool, and sometimes not quite as obvious as you would think. I definitely ran into a lot of hiccups with this one, but with that said, as always, again, I thank you for watching, and I hope to see you all next time. Later.
Say the word, I'll take a peek of the devil.